Medieval weapons were more than just tools of war. Some were considered so terrifying they were officially banned, from the armor-piercing crossbow to the unquenchable Greek fire. These are the weapons that reshaped history. In 1139, Pope Innocent II declared the crossbow hateful to God. This wasn't just about the lethality, it was about social order. A commoner with a crossbow could kill a noble who had trained for a lifetime. The ban failed. Richard the Lionheart championed the weapon, only to be killed by a crossbow bolt in 1199. By the Battle of Crécy, the crossbow's power was undeniable, piercing the thickest plate armor of the day. Then there was Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's secret napalm. This liquid flame burned even on water, saving Constantinople twice from massive sieges. To the Crusaders, it was a cowardly and devilish weapon that defied the laws of nature. Poisoned weapons were the ultimate taboo. From arsenic-laced rings like the Borgia's Cantarella to poison-tipped blades in dark alleys, these were the tools of the assassin. Seen as a coward's art, their use was often met with execution. Not all weapons were meant to kill. The man-catcher, a spring-loaded collar on a long pole, was designed to pull nobles off their horses. Why? Because a captured king like John II of France was worth a fortune in ransom. Silent and deadly, caltrops were the landmines of the Middle Ages. These four spiked iron stars were scattered across battlefields to cripple horses and infantry, forcing armies into a slow, agonizing crawl through the mud. For brute force, nothing beat the Morning Star and the war flail. These spiked iron weights were built to crush plate armor and shatter bones through sheer blunt trauma, making a mockery of the knight's expensive defenses. Precision came with the estoc, a needle-like sword designed to pierce the gaps in a knight's armor, while the heavy arbalist used a mechanical windlass to fire bolts with enough force to penetrate steel plates at range. The end of the knightly era came not with a blade, but with a bang. The arquebus, an early firearm, rendered years of knightly training obsolete. Despite attempts by Emperor Maximilian I to ban it, the age of gunpowder had arrived. History is written in blood and innovation. Which of these medieval weapons do you think was the most terrifying? Let us know in the comments below. The Catholic Church once declared that certain weapons were so hateful to God that anyone who used them against fellow Christians would face eternal damnation. Knights, mercenaries, and rulers ignored these bans repeatedly. Some of these tools were so brutally effective, so dishonorable, or so disruptive to the established social order that entire kingdoms later attempted to erase them from historical memory. Yet they changed the face of medieval warfare forever. Here are 10 of the most feared, banned, or despised weapons of the medieval period, and the reasons they struck terror into the hearts of nobles, popes, and military commanders alike. In 1139, Pope Innocent II stood before the Second Lateran Council and issued one of the strongest condemnations in church history. He called the crossbow a weapon hateful to God and deadly to mankind. Its use against fellow Christians was strictly forbidden, with the penalty of excommunication and eternal damnation. Despite this spiritual threat, virtually every European army continued to manufacture and deploy crossbows on a massive scale. The Church's deep alarm was entirely justified. For the first time in history, a common peasant farmer, a man who had spent his life working the fields and handling livestock, could pick up a relatively inexpensive weapon, receive just a few weeks of training, and kill a noble knight who had trained for combat since early childhood. A steel-tipped quarrel fired from 150 yards or more could penetrate chainmail, padded armor, and even early plate with terrifying ease. Decades of expensive sword training, costly inherited armor passed down through noble families, and the entire myth of noble martial superiority were suddenly rendered almost meaningless by a simple mechanical device in the hands of a commoner. This weapon struck at the very heart of the feudal system, which depended on the idea that nobles were inherently better fighters due to their birth, wealth, and lifelong training. The crossbow threatened to democratize death itself. The hypocrisy of the era was glaring. During the Crusades, the same knights who were supposed to uphold the papal ban enthusiastically embraced crossbows when fighting Muslim forces. After all, the Pope had only prohibited their use against Christians. Richard the Lionheart became one of the weapon's most famous advocates, deploying thousands of crossbowmen in his campaigns in the Holy Land and elsewhere. In a striking example of historical irony, Richard himself was mortally wounded by a crossbow bolt in 1199 while besieging the castle of Calais in France. The king, who had done more than almost any other English monarch to popularize the weapon, died by it. Remarkably, the official papal prohibition remained on the books for more than 400 years. Yet in practice, it was largely ignored. Armies across Europe treated the ban as little more than a polite suggestion from Rome, while continuing to stockpile thousands of crossbows for their campaigns. The crossbow's impact went far beyond individual battles. It accelerated the decline of the old knightly class and helped pave the way for professional standing armies, composed of paid soldiers rather than feudal levies. Its relatively low cost and ease of use meant that even modest towns and city-states could field effective forces, shifting power away from traditional noble households. No weapon in medieval history inspired more fear than the Byzantine Empire's secret incendiary weapon known as Greek fire. This liquid flame was so devastating that burning to death on land seemed almost merciful compared to encountering it at sea. Greek fire had several horrifying properties. It floated on water, clung tenaciously to surfaces, and was almost impossible to extinguish with conventional means. Byzantine naval crews mounted bronze siphons on the prows of their ships and projected the flaming liquid up to 50 feet or more, turning entire enemy fleets into floating infernos within minutes. The Empire guarded the formula with fanatical obsession. Revealing any part of the secret was punishable by immediate execution. Even emperors were not trusted with the complete recipe. It was deliberately divided among different teams of craftsmen, so that no single individual could reproduce the weapon alone. This level of compartmentalization went far beyond normal military secrecy. It reflected genuine terror that the formula might fall into enemy hands. Historians and modern chemists believe the mixture likely included crude oil or naphtha, pine resin for thickening, and quicklime. The quicklime component was particularly vicious. It reacted exothermically with water, causing the flames to burn even more intensely when victims tried to douse them with seawater. During the Arab sieges of Constantinople in 678 AD and later campaigns, Greek fire repeatedly saved the city. Arab fleets were devastated, and the psychological trauma was so profound that Muslim commanders attempted to negotiate specific treaties banning the weapon. The mere mention of Greek fire could demoralize entire navies before battle even began. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, the exact formula was lost forever. Despite extensive modern efforts, including chemical analysis of surviving Byzantine texts and experimental recreations, no one has been able to perfectly replicate the original Greek fire's performance and properties. The Byzantines took their greatest military secret to the grave. Medieval codes of chivalry and church doctrine were unanimous in condemning poisoned weapons. Using toxins transformed combat from an honorable test of skill into cold-blooded murder. Yet poison remained a popular tool throughout the period, especially in Italian city-states. Poisoning turned warfare and politics into a shadowy game. Italian alchemists and assassins developed sophisticated compounds such as cantarella, a potent arsenic-based mixture that could cause death days after a seemingly minor scratch. The notorious Borgia family was widely rumored to favor such poisons, sometimes delivered via rings with hidden needles during handshakes or shared meals. Aconite, extracted from the beautiful but deadly monkshood flower, caused rapid heart failure and collapse. Venetian and Florentine assassins perfected discreet delivery methods, including hollow rings, poisoned gloves, and coated blades. A knight might survive a battlefield encounter only to die weeks later from what appeared to be a mysterious fever. Despite repeated threats of eternal damnation from the church, political assassinations by poison actually increased during the 15th century. When power, wealth, or revenge were on the line, religious warnings often carried little weight. This weapon was brutally honest about its purpose, capturing high-value enemies alive for ransom rather than killing them. The man-catcher consisted of a long pole tipped with a spring-loaded metal collar, or prongs designed to snap shut around a knight's neck, arm, or leg, immobilizing him without necessarily killing him. The economics drove its popularity. Killing an armored knight yielded his equipment and horse. Capturing a noble alive could generate a fortune in ransom. When King John II of France was taken prisoner at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, his ransom was set at 3 million gold crowns, an astronomical sum equivalent to several billion dollars in modern terms. German Landsknecht mercenaries in particular favored the man-catcher and continued using versions of it well into the 17th century, despite repeated official prohibitions. Commanders hated the weapon because it encouraged soldiers to fight for personal financial gain, rather than loyalty to king or cause. These deceptively simple devices, 4 iron spikes welded together so that one point always faced upward no matter how they landed, functioned as medieval landmines. Scattered across fields or approach routes, they could cripple expensive war horses and throw cavalry charges into total disarray. The asymmetry was brutal. A single war horse represented decades of peasant labor and breeding investment, while a handful of caltrops could be produced for pennies. Knights condemned their use in tournaments as unchivalrous, but deployed them liberally in real warfare. The Romans had used them against Hannibal's war elephants over 2,000 years earlier. Japanese ninjas scattered them while retreating to make pursuit suicidal. The design was so effective that it remained virtually unchanged for centuries. As plate armor grew thicker and stronger, standard crossbows struggled to penetrate. Engineers responded with the arbalest, a massive steel crossbow with draw weights exceeding 1,000 pounds, cocked using a mechanical windlass or craniquin. Loading could take up to 2 minutes, but when the heavy bolt was finally released, it could punch through the best plate armor at ranges of 200 yards or more. Genoese crossbowmen became some of the most feared and highly paid mercenaries in Europe. At the Battle of Crécy in 1346, rain-soaked bowstrings famously failed them against English longbowmen, but the weapon still proved that raw mechanical power could defeat years of traditional martial training. 7. The Morning Star, the ultimate armor crusher. A heavy iron ball covered in long spikes, mounted on a sturdy wooden handle. This weapon was specifically designed to defeat plate armor by crushing, rather than cutting or piercing. The blunt force trauma transferred directly through the metal to the victim's body, shattering bones and causing fatal internal injuries, while often leaving the armor outwardly intact. Peasant armies and Swiss pikemen particularly favored the Morning Star for its simplicity and devastating effectiveness. A skilled blacksmith could produce one in a single afternoon, and it required almost no specialized training to use effectively. A spiked ball or bars connected to a handle by one or more chains. The war flail shattered every convention of predictable combat. The swinging head could whip around shields and parries in completely unpredictable arcs, making traditional defensive techniques almost useless. It was notoriously dangerous to the user as well. Many soldiers accidentally injured themselves or nearby comrades. Tournament officials repeatedly tried to ban it from competitions because even experienced fighters struggled to control it safely. Peasant rebels often converted agricultural flails into weapons, while professional soldiers commissioned purpose-built versions with longer chains and multiple heads. This was not a traditional cutting sword. The estoc was a long, rigid, triangular, or diamond-shaped thrusting blade designed purely to exploit the small gaps in plate armor, armpit joints, eye slits, groin areas, and other vulnerable points. Knights despised the estoc because it rendered years of elegant swordsmanship training largely irrelevant. At the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, English forces used similar thrusting weapons to devastating effect, methodically finishing off fallen French knights trapped in the mud. Wealthy nobles responded by adding extra armor patches over known weak points, dramatically increasing the weight and cost of their harnesses. The arquebus represented the ultimate disruption of the medieval world. This early firearm, a simple metal tube mounted on a stock that fired lead balls using gunpowder, allowed an unskilled foot soldier to kill a heavily armored noble from a distance with minimal training. French knights famously executed captured arquebusiers as common criminals rather than honorable prisoners of war. Emperor Maximilian I in fact banned firearms from honorable combat. Yet, at the Battle of Pavia in 1525, Spanish arquebusiers slaughtered thousands of French nobles in their finest plate armor. Within a few decades, full plate armor became largely obsolete on European battlefields. Gunpowder weapons effectively destroyed the old feudal military order.